Welcome to another edition of the Voice of Palestine, Voice of the Palestinian People. It's February 20th, 2014, and I'm your co-host, Hanna Khawas. This week we are interviewing Chand, a member of the Israeli Apartheid Week Toronto Organizing Committee, and she's also part of Students Against Israeli Apartheid at the University of Toronto. She will talk with us about the history of Israeli Apartheid Week IAW, which began in Toronto, as well as detailing some of the activities planned for this year. Good afternoon to you, Chand, and welcome to the Voice of Palestine.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for having us on the radio show, and absolutely would love to share the history of the week. So, yeah. Israeli Apartheid Week is an educational campaign, and it seeks to raise awareness about Israel's apartheid policies, practices, and institutions that affect all Palestinians, those inside Israel, in the occupied territories, and in the diaspora. IAW is also a central venue to promote the International Boycott, Divestment, and Sanctions campaign, which is known as the BDS campaign, and to build cross-movement solidarity with other individuals and groups involved in similar struggles. IAW began here at the University of Toronto in Canada in February 2005 in order to take up the United Palestinian call for boycott, divestment, and sanctions, which was a call issued in 2005 by over 170 Palestinian organizations representing Palestinian civil society. And the demands of this call are the full equality for Arab Palestinian citizens of Israel, an end to the occupation and colonization of all Arab lands and dismantling the wall, and the protection of the Palestinian refugees' right of return to their homes and properties as stipulated in UN Resolution 194. And so since IAW's launch in 2005, IAW has spread across the globe, and this year it will be held in over 200 cities, which is quite remarkable. Also, as diverse as its participation, IAW has become a network to link a wide range of issues relating to international justice and indigenous rights. And these topics are often explored and acted upon at IAW through a variety of formats, which include film screenings, lectures, cultural events, and protests. So basically, IAW really focuses on building the BDS campaign, mobilizing support for the campaign across similar struggles, and taking action that can pressure institutions and governments. And I just want to expand on this latter point a little bit. The BDS call highlights the fact that resolutions demanding Israel respect the most fundamental rights of the Palestinian people have already been expressed on many occasions by different international bodies. However, the most powerful member states in the international community have consistently refused to take up the enforcement of these resolutions. And so the campaign basically is calling upon global civil society to take actions that will pressure these governments and international institutions to finally implement international law in accordance with the prevailing global consensus.
Yeah, I guess with the American veto, they really protecting Israel from any international action against Israeli policies, which not just doesn't only include apartheid, but also war crimes and ethnic cleansing, which is a war crime under international law. So, just to mention to our listeners, since 1972 till now, after the Gaza war, where the last veto took place, it's already 43 vetoes by the U.S. to protect Israel at the Security Council. I'm talking about. So 43. So it shows you the extent of the U.S. support for this pariah state, not just in the Middle East, but in the whole world. Yeah.
Yeah, and actually, it's really interesting because these vetoes we also see in Canada. Canada has also had from Israel's inception has had so many different vetoes on several resolutions that that continue to support the atrocities and the plight of the Palestinian people. And so the Canadian government is also in ways implicated in this.
Yeah, for sure. We have issued a statement actually about Canada's shameful role as Canada-Palestine Association here. And just last year we documented 17 out of 18 resolutions that were passed actually, in large majority at the United Nations General Assembly. 17 out of 18, the 18th they abstained on it, but 17 they voted against, with few countries, including the U.S. and Australia and the Micronesias, I call them, the small countries there who are puppets for the U.S. But that's the extent. 17 out of 18 Canada voted against at the UN General Assembly. So it shows really, before they weren't that obvious. They were trying, successive Canadian governments always supported Israel, but they weren't that in your face, as the conservative government. So, yeah, you're right.
Yeah, and I wanted to highlight that I think that you were saying prior, perhaps it wasn't as in your face, but it's become actually very in your face recently, and I can actually speak to that. But you're right. The Canadian government has had a long-standing unconditional support for Israel and its apartheid policies. As we know there've been MPPs that have condemned IAW. Jason Kenney, the Citizenship and Immigration Minister, Michael Ignatieff. These are, just some people within government that have condemned IAW. But most recently, Prime Minister Stephen Harper visited the Israeli Knesset, the parliament, where he gave a speech. And there are two very notable aspects of his speech that I want to really highlight. So the first is actually Harper's attacks on critics of Israel that compare South African apartheid to Israel. And the second is Harper accused the global movement for boycott, divestments, and sanctions against Israel of being anti-Semitic. And I want to address both of these issues in a little bit of detail in relationship to sort of what you brought up around the shameful aspects of this. So the first is on apartheid, and I want to quote Harper here. He recently, in his speech at the Knesset, said, I quote, "Most disgracefully of all, some openly call Israel an apartheid state. Now think about that statement. Think about the twisted logic and outright malice behind that. A state based on freedom, democracy, and the rule of law that was founded so Jews can flourish as Jews is condemned in the mass language of anti-racism." He says, friends, that is nothing short of sickening, unquote. So Mr. Harper is appallingly ignorant, right, here of what is actually said in this regard by notable Israeli academics like Ilan Pappé and Yuri Davis and Israeli leaders who have described Israel's approach as apartheid. And I want to provide an example or two. So Israel's Attorney General from 1993 to 1996, his name is Michael Ben Yair, described Israel's approach to the Palestinian territories akin to apartheid when he said, I quote, "We enthusiastically choose to become a colonial society, ignoring international treaties, expropriating lands, transferring settlers from Israel to the occupied territories, engaging in land theft, and finding justification for all these activities. We developed two judicial systems, one progressive liberal in Israel, the other cruel, injurious in the occupied territories. In effect, we established an apartheid regime in the occupied territories immediately following their capture." Also, Roman Brofman, chair of the Democratic Choice faction in the Jihad Party, has criticized what he termed an apartheid regime in the occupied territories, stating that the policy of apartheid has also infiltrated sovereign Israel and discriminates daily against Israeli Arabs and its own minorities. So clearly, within Israeli society, this analysis of apartheid exists among its own leaders and intellectuals and within, civil society, yet Harper chooses to not only remain ignorant of this analysis, but also ignorant of basic international law, and perhaps, it's time to revisit the 1973 UN Convention on Apartheid.
And you're right. you mentioned Yuri Davis. Actually, he's anti-Zionist Jew. He was the first one to draw this parallel in his book, Israel is an Apartheid State. He's the first one who wrote the book about, Israeli apartheid. So not just that, I think it's more dangerous, and I talked with previous guests, that by Mr. Harper claiming that all the Israeli atrocities and the Israeli war crimes, they claiming them to the Jews. This what creates anti-Semitism, really, not the other way around.
That's right.
Because when he says that what Israel is doing is it's blood libeling, really, the Jews, and many Jews we interviewed some of them on the show, and they really reject this sweeping generalization that what Israel does is in their name, and some of them even organize committees saying not in our name.
That's right.
So it's clear what he said, and like you said, he doesn't know what the hell he's talking about, because there is many South Africans, many leaders in the South African struggle who visited Palestine. We documented maybe 10 or 11 on our website, and there is so many. There was an article even in Rabel documents more about quotes from South African leaders of the struggle against apartheid that said if it's not as comparable to Israeli apartheid, it's worse. Like many of them said, it's worse, So
and also the Jewish South Africans, especially people like Ronnie Casserols, who were involved with the ANC, have made very clear statements around that apartheid analogy. But actually, I also wanted to touch on the second part of Harper's speech around, the so-called new anti-Semitism. And in that speech, he said, especially prevalent on campuses, and then here I'm quoting him, where intellectualized arguments against Israeli policies thinly mask the underlying realities, such as the shunning of Israeli academics and the harassment of Jewish students, end quote. Now, having just returned from Palestine a few months ago, I want to make very clear the underlying realities that Palestinians face. I witnessed this, I saw this with my, own eyes. While the Israeli state protects the freedoms of some of its citizens, Palestinians face many injustices, including blockades, evictions, home demolitions, exile, punitive arrests, unfair trials, and checkpoints that restrict freedom of movement. For instance, Palestinians' right to education has been severely impeded by university closing, roadblocks, and the destruction of schools, especially when we saw that in 2008 and 2009 on the Israeli attack on Gaza, and that has been documented by Israeli human rights groups such as Gisha and the International Court of Justice and the United Nations. I think what's also really notable here is Israeli academic institutions are not neutral players in their country's oppression of the Palestinian people. In fact, they play crucial roles in developing military and surveillance technologies, structuring government policies of dispossession, occupying confiscated lands, and promoting ideologies that justify and institutionalize Israeli apartheid. And actually, many Canadian universities have institutional links to Israel, and both governments are pressing for closer bonds. So, by falsely equating the criticism of Israeli policy with anti-Semitism, Harper completely has misrepresented the peace-seeking character of a movement that has been embraced by many, including Jewish students and academics in Israel and around the world. And I think that's why groups like Faculty for Palestine and Students Against Israeli Apartheid reject Harper's spurious claims about the academic boycott and student divestment movement and want to challenge Israeli exceptionalism that is continuously echoed by those who routinely exempt Israel from criticism for actions that would be condemned elsewhere. Yet, elected officials, members of the media, and university administrators in Canada have attempted to silence criticism of Israeli policy on campus. And so, instead of silencing criticism, we really want to urge people to attend Israeli Apartheid Week, to come, and to see what our analysis is and to be able to partake in discussion and dialogue and debate rather than just, criticize and silence.
Yeah, and one of the most disgraceful act was by the Ontario legislature in 2010 when they condemned the Israeli Apartheid Week, which, I mean, it's none of their business as a provincial legislator, but they condemned it unanimously, and they showed their ignorance and their bias towards Israel. Why do you think these politicians, like Jason Kenney and these again, the Manitoba legislator also took a similar resolution in 2010. But why do you think these politicians, especially, the right wings, actually in the case of Ontario, there was a MPP from the NDP, Cheryl Deneva. Yeah. So it's not really just the right wing, but there is some so-called progressive. And the same with the leader of the NDP now he's clearly on the side of Israeli apartheid, and he doesn't hide it really. There is no really progressive politician that really support the human rights, and because that's what it is. I mean, we are an anti-racist groups that are calling to end for racism and apartheid. This is
that's
similar
right.
to the South African movement that took place in the 70s, 80s, and till apartheid was toppled. So why you think these politicians feel obliged to say how high when Israel tells them to jump?
Well, I mean, I think very, I can't speak for them, nor do I know, what they think about. But I think that what's pretty obvious is that there's a really big lobby, a Zionist lobby that obviously has a lot of political clout in terms of votership, and I think that there's a lot of pressure from that lobby, who are very powerful people with money and with power, and I think that keeps a lot of these politicians and leaders, seeking out support and seeking out pressure from these kinds of groups. And so I think, that's sort of my understanding of it. I think the other discourse that's often used is that, Stephen Harper said this in his speech around, Canada shares the similar values as Israel and all this kind of stuff around similar values around liberal democracy and whatnot. So while I think the values is what, is discursively kind of talked about, at the same time, there are obviously interests that are around capital, around neoliberal interests of trade and other sorts of capitalist partnerships of investments that actually, I think, guide this support for Israel. Anyway, but
objectively also, I just might add that they share the same ideological background as a settler colonialist entity. So
that's right.
That has to do. But do you think also something to do with because Zionism is not really Jewish only. It's there is like in the U.S. alone there is over 70 million Christian Zionists, which is 12 times the number of Zionist Jews inside Israel. So do you think this has, because many times people refer to Harper as a Christian Zionist, do you think this has a factor in it too?
Yeah, I think actually the IJV, which is the
Independent Jewish Voices,
exactly. They actually, in a recent, as a commentary on Harper's recent trip, actually, suggested that there is a relationship between evangelical Christians who believe that Israel must exist to promote the second coming of Jesus Christ, which would provide Jews with a choice between conversion to Christianity and eternal damnation. And this is coming from IJV, and there is this idea that there is an evangelical Christian base, and I'm not sure what his religious views are around that, but of course there is definitely a relationship between an evangelical Christian base for votership, right? And I think that's where I can tie kind of thinking about that. But I think what I also want to sort of emphasize is just kind of going back to one of the major maybe ways in which of why there's been a lot of condemnation maybe in the last little while is perhaps it's because of the victories of the BDS and the successes of the BDS movement, both locally and globally. And I think that is one of the exciting things that Israeli Apartheid Week this year internationally and locally is trying to really highlight, is some of the amazing successes that have taken place and also some of the ways in which we're trying to mobilize and build the movement further. And so, you know, you mentioned at the beginning of the program if I could outline some of those the programming that's going to take place.
Sure, that'll be
and
great.
So I wanted to kind of segue to highlight some of the ways in which campaigns have emerged here locally in Toronto, and then what some of the programming will be this year for IAW. So in Toronto this year, there'll be several BDS local campaigns that will be discussed, particularly academic boycott, the divestment campaign, and then the SodaStream boycott campaign. So Faculty for Palestine has launched an anti-normalization and academic boycott campaign, which will be discussed on Monday, March the 10th at 7 p.m., along with Dr. Salim Veli from the University of Johannesburg. And Salim Veli was very active in the academic boycott campaign in South Africa that convinced the University of Johannesburg to break links with Ben Gurion. And so the launch of this campaign is really, really timely because in July 2013, the Association of Universities and Colleges of Canada, the AUCC, and the Association of University Heads of Israel signed a memorandum of understanding during a visit of Canadian university presidents at Tel Aviv University. And this agreement intended to coordinate and regularize research, teaching, and other ties between the countries, which marks an institutionalization and normalization of Canadian university complicity in Israeli occupation and apartheid. And if this goes unchallenged, the framework would allow the AUCC to act as a host and a central site for creating and expanding the sorts of relations that the BDS movement urges us to boycott. And so this panel that will take place on Monday, March 10th, becomes very important as the conversation is really trying to get us to understand the logic here and then ways that the academic boycott campaign can take us to sort of, resist this kind of activity. As well, as you may know, in 2012, 11 Canadian university student associations passed motions supporting BDS in their student unions, and in particular, students at the University of Toronto and York University launched campaigns to divest from companies that support Israeli apartheid. And on March 4th at IAW, a member of Students Against Israeli Apartheid will speak about the divestment campaigns taking place on the campuses, the kind of backlash they've gone through, but ways that they're also moving the work further. Alongside with the former coordinator of the BNC, the Boycott National Committee from Palestine, and a notable speaker from South Africa. So that is scheduled for March 4th. And then in addition to these campaigns, as part of an international campaign to boycott SodaStream in 2013, the Coalition Against Israeli Apartheid asked Bed Bath and Beyond Canada to stop carrying SodaStream products. So this campaign will be discussed in detail on March 6th at IAW. And that evening there'll also be an Indigenous speaker, an Indigenous activist that addresses issues of settler colonialism right here in Canada. So that is going to be a really important link in trying to make the connections between settler colonialisms and resistances across struggles. And then on March 7th, there will be a discussion on Israeli pinkwashing, homo-nationalism, and love under the time of apartheid. And then we're also extremely thrilled this year to have part of our week international speakers from Lebanon, South Africa, Syria, and Palestine that will address and share lessons on boycott and divestment activities in their specific context. And so, we really hope that you and all the listeners and everybody else will join us at the 10th annual Israeli Apartheid Week taking place this year, March 4th to 11th. And our full schedule of events and speaker buyers will be available very shortly on the Facebook page, www.facebook.com/IAW Toronto. And for information on IAW taking place in other cities in Canada and across the world, I really urge people to check out the apartheidweek.org website for details on programming taking place in various cities, and the Toronto schedule will be up on that website as well. So essentially, this is the kind of work that has been taking place, and I'm really excited to be part of a coordinating committee that is putting together an amazing week full of really wonderful speakers that are going to be speaking on these campaigns and ways that we can build this movement further, and ways that we can, build solidarities across local but also global struggles.
What's also heartening that, it started in Toronto, like you said, in 2005, but
That's
it's
right.
spread all over the world. And what's heartening, really, it now in Palestine, in historic Palestine, many people are commemorating it, whether in Gaza or the West Bank, even inside Israel. I think this is really significant, and it's becoming a international movement. Don't you think? And it is not a victory for the people who initiated the idea, but also it's a victory for the BDS campaign, don't you think?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, I think this is what one of the things that is exciting in terms of that IAW has grown across cities. It's grown across countries. It's also, its focus has become on really trying to speak about BDS in different ways and build a campaign in various ways that are very context specific. So what might be happening, for example, Sama Idris is going to be here speaking about the Lebanese context, which has a particular history and role with Israel that a country like Canada doesn't have. So there are particularities to the BDS movement that is very specific to local context, and I think that's what's really amazing, that IAW gets to take place in all of these cities, but the particularities of BDS is talked about, and addressed for that local context. And I think the other part to that is that you're allowed to see the similarities and differences and share all of these ways in which different places are operating, but also the sharing of strategies and victories and alliances between activists across the globe. So I think IAW is, it started off in a small way as, a campus activity, which has now grown into a global movement and has become part of a global movement, and that is certainly a victory and a really amazing way to celebrate the 10th anniversary of Israeli Apartheid Week.
It's really heartening in general, really, to see such support, and also it's really the minimum people can do in North America, since the regimes, whether in the U.S. or Canada, are clearly complicit in Israeli war crimes and apartheid. Right. So this is a non-violent way of reacting to the aggression and the violation of international law by Israel. So in a way also, Shand, I think these guys who are really opposing the Israeli Apartheid Week did us a service by publicizing it to the public, because I'm not saying their position is correct, but I'm saying indirectly they are really bringing it to the attention of the public. And as a Globe and Mail poll in 2003 said, that the more people are aware of the situation in Palestine, Israel, the more they support the Palestinian struggle and the Palestinian people.
And I think because the Palestinian struggle and the BDS movement and Israeli Apartheid Week and this is based on freedom, justice, and equality of all people. I think when you have principles like that guide a movement, if people are on the side of justice and are in and are for equality and are for true freedom of the Palestinian people, they are going to support it. And so, they are on the right side of history, and they will support it. And that's heartening to see when we see people who stand on the right side of justice. So, I think the movement only will build and will only strengthen, regardless of what kind of backlash and what kind of critique comes, because these movements are based on facts, they're based on realities, and they're based on struggles for freedom, justice, and equality. So.
Yeah, and really the solidarity is being solidified. I am not sure if you're aware or if you know, if you could tell us in more details, the student union election at York University, I believe, just was yesterday or the day before, and they elected a progressive slate where they support the BDS movement. Do you have any idea about it? Or?
I don't know about the particularities at York, but I do know that the student unions, yes, on campuses are becoming a lot more supportive. And, you know, I've been around for a while in terms of, you know, campuses, and we see that positionality change. 5 years ago, there was a lot of resistance in the student unions, but as you know, as the movement is growing, as the analysis is shaping up, as people are coming to Israeli Apartheid Week, as people are partaking in the victories of the BDS struggle, are partaking in the BDS movement, I think that the support is growing, and I think that, you know, when something symbolic happens in one place, the domino effect is seen. So when you have, you know, when you have, you know, someone as notable as Stephen Hawking boycott or make a statement, it then, you know, ripples to other associations that can also make that kind of, you know, stance, to take that stance very solidly. And I think in the student movement, that's certainly what's happening, is that the student unions, once one campus, you know, once one campus sort of in the United States, you know, pushed hard and got a victory, it's also trickled into Canada. And again, like, this is going to be really flushed out and talked about at IAW on Tuesday evening. So again, encouraging people to come out and really listen to the challenges that the student movement is facing, but also the amazing progressive politics that students are building on. And there is support, and it's exciting to see that students are becoming more aware, and the unions and the members of the unions are now proposing and wanting to know about BDS, which is very, you know, unique, because 5 years ago this was not the climate. So that's really amazing, an amazing stride, I think.
Yeah, you are with Saya also at the University of Toronto, aren't you? Could you tell us a bit about the attitude of the administration from, you know, your activities?
You know, in the past, I think there was a lot of harsh backlash around the activities, but over the years, I think there's become a little more space for us to do the work. And so, you know, in the most recent years, we haven't faced as much backlash. But I think, of course, historically, when IAW started, it was, you know, things like rooms would be canceled, and we'd have issues with booking space and different kinds of things that, you know, around U of T. Although York has had a lot of challenges as the administration has really cracked down on Saya because of the BDS resolutions that was passed, and they were banned as a student group. And so the York Saya group has had obviously different kinds of challenges and a lot of different kinds of pressures from the administration. So U of T, we haven't seen that this year, but again, we can never tell because, you know, it can be very calm, but at any point, depending on the success of the work that's being done, we can see backlash. So there's always push and there's always pressure from various places, but I think the students continue to work really hard and continue to do the work that enables us to fight even the university administration. So
no, that's good news actually, and it is as a result of the persistent struggle that the students are waging really to solidify first the BDS movement, and second the IWA, Israeli Apartheid Week IAW.
Right.
Yeah. So you know, just I wanna ask you a final question, really, on actually two things. How people, you mentioned some how they can get the information. You mentioned the website and the Facebook, and we will announce the website on our you know, show this week. But you said there is a Facebook also. Could you mention?
Yes.
Yeah.
So there's a Facebook group that is online that will give you a full schedule of our events, and the schedule will also circulate, through listservs and can be found on the web. But the main address of the Israeli Apartheid Week page is IAW Toronto. So it'll be Facebook and then /IAW Toronto.
Yeah, actually they could also search for it on Facebook. It's I believe there is two there. There is one for the international IAW, the international, and one for the Toronto. I'm not sure if I'm correct. Am I?
So there are few, which will say Israeli Apartheid Week Toronto. There'll be a couple of them, but for the Toronto specific schedule, if people can go to www.facebook.com/IAW Toronto, that will give you all of the events that are happening in Toronto. And then, for the rest of the cities, the apartheidweek.org website should have all the cities listed, and you can click on it, and that should give more insight. We know that a lot of schedules are just being finalized this week, and people will be uploading those schedules very soon, so they will become available shortly, and this is one of the best ways to access the information. And we also ask people who are going to be attending to pass along the website and the program to friends, family members, colleagues, and anybody else that they want to invite to the event. So we're looking forward to an amazing week, and we hope to see all of you there.
Yeah, and the other thing I wanted to ask you is how people could do, in addition to doing PDS support work and boycotting, the PDS movement is not just for products produced in the settlement. It's a general boycott, and the call didn't specify just the settlements. Actually, it included all Israeli products. The boycott, statement by the 170 civil societies in Palestine. So in addition to boycotting Israeli products, and even I could go as far as saying those people who are enabling Israel should be boycotted, but this is debatable in the movement, but I don't see why not boycott people who are enabling war crimes. I think it's a legitimate target for us. But in addition to this, you mentioned something really important about for people to do support work, and I see it over the years since Rachel Corrie's death that people who go to Palestine, they become more active and more involved because of the obscene reality that they face and see on the grounds there. Do you encourage people to do that?
I mean, I think for people, I think people who have a conscience that want to learn and need to see it, if that is what helps to see it, and that's going to make you more conscious and aware, and that's going to push you to do solidarity work, absolutely. But, I'm also very mindful of the ways in which solidarity is not principled, and I think it's really important for people who are working in solidarity with the Palestinian movement to be to be focused on doing the work from a place of principle, because the movement should be first and foremost led by the Palestinians, both those that are inside and those that are in exile in the diaspora. And I think that if it takes people have the privilege from Western states and other places to be able to visit and to be able to access and see what's going on. And so if that's what it takes for people to see it and witness it, the realities are atrocious. People, it does move people to get involved. It does move people to want to come back and tell people about what's going on and to make a change. So if that's what it's going to take to move people, then absolutely visit it, see it. But what I also want to emphasize is to ensure that if you come back to do the work in solidarity with Palestinians, to really do that from a place of principled solidarity and to learn from Palestinians, to listen to what is going on and to take guidance from the movement, right? Whether that's through organizations like Kaya, or it's through, PACB, or others that have very clear vision of what that work is, because ultimately we can support the Palestinians in their struggle in solidarity, but we don't lead that struggle. And I think that's really important to remember.
Yeah, we can't replace it, really. Replace their leadership. And this is really basically is what the International Solidarity Movement Basis of Unity is saying, and many people joined it on that basis. And we encourage people really to, show solidarity by, not pretending to be supremacists. We tell you what to do, we tell you what to do, and do what we tell you, because we know better than you what's good for your struggle, which is really ridiculous, But you're right, there is such a tendency on the left here. Anyway, it really was a pleasure, Shan, talking to you. And if you have a final word, go ahead to our listeners.
My final word is that, Israeli Apartheid Week and the BDS movement is about freedom, justice, and equality. And if you wish to be on the right side of history, please learn about the Palestinian situation. Please learn about the campaign. Please learn about the call. And please join us in the struggle. And that's all I have to say.
Thanks. Thank you. Thanks, Shand. It's really a pleasure talking to you, and keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And with that, we conclude another edition of The Voice of Palestine. Our final music is a unique South African-Palestinian collaboration between the South African band the Mavrix and Palestinian Oud player Mohammed Omar, called The New Black. The March 2012 release of this song and video was marked with a Skype link-up between the Soweto Palestine Solidarity Alliance and activists in Palestine to launch that year's Israeli Apartheid Week in Gaza.
Dinner conversation, a constant irritation and consternation, as opposed to a sovereign nation with a history going back 40 generations. Violence, brutality and expulsion, signed off in a convoluted human act to a land with no people for a people with no land. Doing even stranger twist and a holy twist, a superpower's black list. I'm no victim, I'm a terrorist, so do not forgive my insolence. Just answer my question, because I lose patience, and this is my time to be your conscience. This is my time to be your conscience. This is my time to be your conscience. Did I hear you say? Did you hear children bleed in the deathly cold of night, with no warmth, no food inside? Did I hear it say, won't you please end this blockade? Free up occupation is fraught with danger. It's par for the course on a sunny day in Gaza or a massacre on an egg floater. The memories fade of Sabra and Shatila and a little boy called Mohammed Omar, bombed and blasted into a surreal Stone Age city, seething in strife a nation grieves for a shrinking, shriveling landscape shattered and shaken by the subversion of thieves. In an even stranger twist, the oppressor cries victor and is accepted, lauded and applauded in a flurry of sniveling propaganda and hatred. So do not forgive my insolence, just answer my questions, because I'm losing patience, and this is my time to be your conscience. This is my time to be your conscience. This is my time to be your conscience.
Did I hear you say? Did you hear the children plead in the deadly cold of night, with no warmth, no food inside? Did I hear it say, won't you please end this blockade? Free up the food, free up the aid, oh please end this blockade.
Did I hear you speak? Did you hear the children scream when white phosphorus weapons incinerated heaven and left a nation to bleed? Where was Obama when the devil came to Gaza? Did I hear him plead? Show mercy, mercy, please. So do not forgive my sarcasm, my irreverence or cynicism, because all antagonism or criticism of God's chosen is forbidden. As visions and hallucinations of peace is spat out from the belly of an M16. Black hawks and bulldozers batter and betray all reason, deadly and obscene. Conspiracies of conventional and chemical carnage bearing a simple message: resistance in action will be met by the glory of Western civilization. Of your nation, all nation, I beg the question: what's the price of my forgiveness, Jack? What the heck? I'll survive another attack, cause you ain't cutting me no slack. There ain't no going back, my freedom's on track, because Palestinian is the new black. Palestinian is the new black.
Did I hear you say? Did you hear the children plead in the deadly cold of night, with no warmth, no food inside? Did I hear it say, won't you please end this blockade? Free up the food, free up the aid, oh please end this blockade. Please end this blockade. Oh please end this blockade.